what's been said by the president and by his staff and by the chairman of the FCC that they don't like the way CBS has been operated. They don't like the fact that it's on the air. They would like to see it taken off the air. They've said that a number of times. They would like to see people fired. And that's what's happened. I think that this is journalistic interference. It makes no business sense whatsoever. The show is still doing very well. It's the highest rated news program on television. And it has been that way for more than 50 years.
That was retired 60 Minutes correspondent Steve Kroft issuing a stark warning publicly about the destruction of independent journalism by Donald Trump's allies over at CBS. That warning comes after the firing of veteran correspondent Scott Pelley this week and a number of other correspondents and key senior staff members. Today, there's brand new reporting that the fallout also extends to the only 3 correspondents now left at 60 Minutes. On that, Status reports this today, quote, according to people familiar with the matter, Bill Whitaker, Leslie Stahl, and John Wertheim were met Wednesday to discuss their futures at the Venerable News magazine. Deadline is also reporting on this story about anxious CBS News staffers wondering what and who could be next. From that report, quote, I have been in this business a long time, and I have never seen anything this bad. A CBS News insider told Deadline, quote, how are we going to even be able to put on a show next season? A longtime staffer said today of 60 Minutes, quote, we are running out of time and people here, and we need both. I want to bring in the executive editor of Deadline.com, Dominic Patton, who's bylined on that reporting, also joining us. Scott MacFarlane, he is the chief Washington correspondent and host for Midas Touch. But before that, he was a justice correspondent for CBS News. Let me start with you, Scott. Does anything that's been alleged by Scott Pelley or Sharon Alfonsi or Cecilia Vega ring true in terms of your experience as a correspondent for CBS News?
Nobody ever put a heavy hand on any of my reporting. And Nicole, in my final days at CBS in March, I was saying on the CBS Evening News, Trump's lying about the 2020 election and Trump is lying about January 6th. And they invited me back the next day and the next day and the next day. But let me tell you something about Dominic's reporting. I'm not sure how many sources he has on that, but let me add a whole bunch more. That's exactly what's going on inside CBS News. There is a concern about getting through the day and through the week and through the month because, yes, they're losing a lot of people, but, yes, they're also risking their brand through these changes. The way a brand succeeds is through consistency over the years. Consistency, familiar faces, familiar product through the years. They're making wholesale changes to the cash cow inside CBS News. It might work. The changes could improve things, but we've seen this with Coke in the 1980s. We've seen this with other things in media where they make a change to the cast and people don't come back to watch or buy again. This is some high stakes, high wire stuff.
How could they make it better?
One of the things you could do is try to introduce it on other platforms if you want to be more digital and not just on broadcast. You want to have a more 360-degree presence 7 days a week, more kinetic. That's an ambitious goal, and it's a worthy goal, but how do you succeed, Nicole, if you don't have your tentpole talent, the things that made the brand attractive in the first place? Can you be attractive in the digital space on Mondays through Saturdays, Nicole, if you don't have Scott Pelley and Cecilia Vega and Sharon Alfonsi? It all gets harder.
Dominic, take us through what you're reporting.
Well, for one thing, I'd like to thank you, Scott, for the compliment. Much appreciated. And your work is always much appreciated. Look, it's chaos theory in action over there. I mean, that's what it is. It's people who are, there's another quote from our piece from an insider who said it's closed door toxic environment over there. I mean, nobody's really talking out in public. We talked about, Status talked about the meeting of the 3 remaining senior correspondents. They're trying to figure out their future. We've heard they're all taking a breath and kind of figuring out where things are going to land. But there's a lot of breaths to be taken. Let's put it very, very bluntly there. I think also, too, when Scott's talking about brand, I really think that's interesting because I think that the goal here is to destroy the brand because that's what's happened. It's already happened now because you have not only 60 Minutes basically gutted like a dead tree from the inside, but you also have this tremendous anxiety over at CBS News, which before the 60 Minutes purge was the big problem over there for Bari Weiss and her team because they had completely changed that around and were watching a ratings cratering happening. Whether or not it's an issue of trust, whether or not it is, as you know, people talk about, was there political interference, was there not, was there kind of a leaning towards things, was there not? The result simply is it is a husk of what it used to be, and maybe change is good. People talked about that when they spoke to Ted Johnson and I for our piece of yesterday. But the reality is if you're going to make change, why are you breaking something that's not broken? You talked about it. CBS is extremely successful on linear television, one of the few things that still are. It also has been very successful in its digital platform endeavors as well. So it's not like it left that out and they're trying to fill in the gap there. If you're leaning towards the future, linear television doesn't look that great, 60 Minutes at least has well stepped into the future and was bounding along until Bari Weiss came along.
Yeah, I mean, let me cut through the pretense, I guess, that maybe there was room to improve. Like that's a fine, respectfully analysis of the morning show and the evening news, which are perpetually in last place. But 60 Minutes is the white whale that every other news organization in the world has been looking for forever. And what Scott Pelley alleges is that they, quote, made him insert things that weren't true. This isn't about wanting to do self-improvement, and Pelley wasn't on board for doing more like face-to-camera clips for IG. This is not that. This is an allegation from the one-time anchor of the evening news, now the tentpole, to use your word, of 60 Minutes, who said they forced him to put things into stories. You also, I mean, we gloss over Sharon Alfonsi, which if she was the only one that left, that would have been a scandal in its own right. Her CCOT reporting was held ostensibly for more calls to be made to the Trump White House. And it's not even clear to me why Cecilia Vega was fired. I mean, what, Dominique, happens as a consequence for gutting a news program for telling the truth?
Well, at this point, Nicole, I would say nothing. I mean, the fact of the matter is Bari Weiss was put in place by David Ellison soon after his company Skydance bought Paramount. Now they're on the verge of buying Warner Brothers Discovery. And we all know very clearly, as Steve Kroft talked about in the clip before we came on, look, the Trump White House are no fans of CBS. To be honest, conservatives have not been fans of CBS for decades, going back to Richard Nixon, to the Reagan era, and et cetera, et cetera. But this has become much more intense. There has been, of course, a payout that occurred over what was basically a weak, lame lawsuit about supposed editing at CBS at 60 Minutes over a Kamala Harris interview just before the election in 2024. There has been a distinct attempt to pander to the White House. Now, you can say whether or not that's transactional corporate America in action. Fair enough. You want to say that. But this is going a little bit further because this is transactional for a $111 billion deal of taking over Warner Brothers Discovery. Clearly, that is their end goal. And in the process of doing that, you're simply you're destroying yourself. You know, and this is something that they are going to have consequences for. Are those consequences going to come from people pounding tables and stamping their feet? Well, I don't think the Ellisons really care about that, to be honest. I think they have, as somebody once said, a high threshold for pain. And that threshold is obviously very high at this point. But I do think you're going to see repercussions happening down the line because America is in a politically fluid time, if the recent primaries are shown as anything. And certainly, we are going to see a change. Certainly, we've already seen some Republicans are starting to break ranks with the MAGA loyalists. So there might be the reckoning, which is always the third sequel in any franchise, might be coming soon.
Yeah. If I were writing fiction, the reckoning would include all of the conservatives who used to care about the First Amendment joining with the pro-democracy side. But there's a reason I don't write fiction.